I'm using 7 asset classes now. And actually that 4.15% is now up to 4.7%. And you can tweak that a little bit without taking any additional risk and get it up to 5%. So I guess you could say the 4% rule is the 5% rule.
Today we're talking about optimal withdrawal strategies to help you realize a comfortable retirement, or maybe even an early retirement. To help us explore this topic in more depth, I've invited financial researcher Bill Bengen to the show today. In the early 1990s, in response to client questions, Bill began research on the sustainability of withdrawals from stock and bond portfolios, which gave rise to the popular 4% rule. Yeah, you've probably heard of this one. When he's not helping us learn smarter investment planning, Bill enjoys playing tennis and golf in his hometown of Saddlebrook, Arizona. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for the invite, Andy.
Thank you for having this great conversation, and a conversation that I think can help a lot of people out there as they plan for their comfortable retirement. Bill, let's start at the beginning. What is the 4% rule?
You know, that's a great question. It goes back 30 years when I did my first research paper, and because I couldn't find any information about this particular topic wherever I looked, so I decided to break out my spreadsheets and do it myself. And I created a very simple situation where I decided to look at it historically and try to go back as far as 1926 and recreate investor portfolios and find the individual who had the worst experience, the lowest withdrawal rate that would get them through 30 years when they're taking money on a regular basis out of an IRA account, tax-deferred portfolio. So it's a very, very simple situation, but I want to get something quick and dirty so I can kind of get a feel for what, the answer would be. And it turned out when I used just 2 investment classes, U.S. large company stocks and U.S. 5-year bonds, it turned out that the individual could withdraw at the rate of 4.15%. And what that meant, it's kind of like Social Security, where basically the first year, if you have a $100,000 portfolio, you take out 4.15% of that, which would be about $4,150. After that first year, you throw away the percentage, forget all about it, and just simply, like Social Security does, give yourself a cost of living adjustment each year so you're keeping pace with inflation. And that, I published that, and all of a sudden, although I'd intended, it became a rule. Media picked up on it and said, it's 4.15%, as if it applied to everybody. It doesn't apply to everybody. I'd like to get into it more with you here today. But it is basically a worst-case situation based on the person who retired in October of 1968 and ran into a buzzsaw of back-to-back bear markets, which devastated their portfolio, and then high inflation, double-digit inflation. Of course, if you're trying to keep pace with inflation and giving yourself, COLA every year, and you have to increase by 10 and 11% a year, your portfolio is going to be a lot of stress pretty quickly. And that's why they lasted only 30 years.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I have to ask, did it surprise you with how much this idea took off after you did the research and people ran with it?
Yeah, it really did. I did it primarily for my clients. I got invited to talk about it at a conference. And then the next thing you know, I'm on the conference circuit full time, talking to people, getting invitations, interviews from major financial publications. But yeah, I was astonished that happened.
What do you think people drew to it? Just the simplicity of the idea with all the complications, I suppose, out there in retirement planning. Was this a North Star of simplicity for people?
I think it's partly simplicity, partly the fact that it really hadn't been done before. People didn't have any guidance. When I asked around when I was doing this research, some of my fellow financial advisors, they had all kinds of rules of thumb, anywhere from like 2 or 3% up to 8 or 9%, and everything in between. So, it was completely new. And yeah, 4% rule, it's kind of like the golden rule, just something simple you can just apply and that's it. Although I really want to caution about people using that, as the sole source of wisdom for retirement withdrawals.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I think your ideas around the 4% rule personally and through your further research have changed over the years. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely, yeah. Over time, I made my research more sophisticated, and instead of sticking with just two asset classes, I created a portfolio more representative of what you would expect today, a more diversified portfolio. I'm using seven asset classes now, and actually that 4.15% is now up to 4.7%, and you can tweak that a little bit without taking any additional risk and get it up to 5%. So I guess you could say the 4% rule is the 5% rule. Okay. But I really want to emphasize that, in my database, I have 400 retirees. They retire in the first day of each quarter, beginning January 1st, 1926, and then, April 1st, 26, and all the way to date. There's almost 100 retirees. That 5% rule applies to only one of all those 400 retirees. I mean, the other 399 could have taken more, and in some cases, quite a bit more. In fact, the average over the last 100 years, believe it or not, is 7%. Although the last 2 decades, we haven't been able to come close to that except for a few months in 2009. So, but that has been the historical experience, much higher than the 5% rule.
Wow, that's a so through your research and maybe just through learning about people's retirement over the years, or even your personal situation, have you found that people were, as they were being diligent with this, maybe saving too much and then not taking advantage of withdrawing as much as they could?
Yeah, if you try to use the 5% rule, which is really applied to a really dire combination of economic and financial circumstances, uh, let's say you apply it today. I estimate today, even though, it's not the greatest time to retire because the stock market is so expensive, um, you'll find out that you probably can still take out about 5.5%. So if you only take out five, you're going to find yourself building wealth over time. And I mean, if you're comfortable, passing away at the age of 90 with a huge pile and no regrets at not having spent that when you could have, that's fine. But I think most people would prefer to enjoy their expenses at the highest level they can safely, maintain them.
Yeah, I think people who are listening to this are young parents. They're starting their lives. They are concerned with, maybe over saving and planning and I don't want to say, dying with a pile of money and then some regrets, because none of us want the regrets part. Of course, it would be nice to leave something to our children or our children's children to have some generational wealth built up, but not to an excess where they're missing out on enjoying their lives today because they're working so hard because they're trying to hit that high savings percentage. So I guess if you're speaking to a young couple right now listening to this that is diligently saving and doing a great job and planning with that original 4% withdrawal rule in mind, would you say, hey, 5%'s okay?
Yeah, that means basically saving so that you earn or you basically have 1/20th, of what or 20 times what your annual income is going to be saved up, which is a lot better than 25, which would have been on a 4% rule. And if you're really unlucky, I mean, if you happen to retire in 20 years and stock market valuations are this high, that's what you'll need. But, stock markets over time tend to normalize. And I would expect, like in 2009, we'll get to more normal valuations. And maybe then you only need 15 times or less what your annual income is saved. And that takes a lot of pressure off the savings throttle.
It does take a lot of pressure off. And I think that when people who are listening to a podcast like this, and we've talked about the 4% rule for so long, it becomes ingrained in our thinking that that's the only way. And to have a conversation with you like this, the creator of the 4% rule, saying it's okay to
Yeah.
take your foot off the gas a little bit, enjoy more life, and at a minimum, 5% is safe, can feel very cathartic for people who are listening to this right now. So first of all, I thank you for going out there and having these types of conversations, because these might be life-changing conversations for people to listen to and could give them more time back in their lives to enjoy what we're really all going for, which is more time with friends and family, more community, more time to take care of our health and have an impact on the world like you have.
Live a life.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you having these candid conversations with me. Let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit about maybe some other rules. You started at the top of the conversation, people saying before this came out, people were all over the board, 2%, 3%.
Yeah.
I've heard financial educators like Dave Ramsey talk about an 8% withdrawal rate. Can you talk about your thoughts around that, and if that's fine? Is that safe? Is it not safe? Talk to us about that.
Well, I haven't had a chance to talk to Dave Ramsey about this, but I've looked at the basis of his calculations, and I think he's overlooked something. Uh, he's assuming like you get an average return over time, and it's constant. And if it was like that, you probably could take that high. But the problem you have is that if you encounter a bear market early in retirement, that devastates the portfolio so much, it drives the withdrawal rate down. So under very, very favorable circumstances, you could go 8%, but this is not the time for that. There are two factors that really affect your number. One is inflation, and the other is stock market valuation. The more expensive the stock market is, the closer we probably are to a stock market bear market. So you want to be very mindful of those two factors when you're choosing a number. And 8% is, I think, is unfortunately far too high for this environment.
Yeah, I'm an optimistic guy, but it seems like 8% might put you into that far too optimistic zone. But if you look at the general range of things, I can see why he might say that. Hey, if your portfolio is doing 12 all the time, yeah, 8 might be good. But to your point, depending on when you're pulling it out, depending on the situation of the stock
That's
market,
true.
if you're looking for a safe
Yeah,
withdrawal rate, that's the difference in the terminology, right? You're saying 5% is safe in a lot of scenarios, in a lot of
yeah.
tested scenarios. 8% might work, but not necessarily in a lot of scenarios. Is that
I
what
think
you're saying?
also assuming because that 12% return, the only way you can get that is to go 100% stocks. And, you hit into a bad bear market with 100% stocks, you're lucky to get 4%, so I've been at this for 30 years and looked at it a lot of different ways. And, my emphasis has always been on, the maximum you can get, but let's not be risky. Let's let history guide us and hope that continues to be a fair guide for the future.
I appreciate that. And then when we're talking about portfolio composition in your retirement years, I know the 100% equities feels like, whoa, that's scary. But in the past, there had been sort of your initial analyzation was like a 50-50 portfolio. Have you changed thoughts around your compensation or your portfolio composition in retirement with regard to this 5% rule? Has it been more equities than bonds?
Yeah, I favor right now something around a 60-40, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, although there's a wide range, somewhere between 45% stocks and 70% stocks that you can choose depending on personal preference, where it doesn't really affect the withdrawal rate much at all, which is pretty amazing. But if you stay within, that range, you should be able to get close to the maximum
Got
possible.
it. I love that. I love that. Yeah, and it's all about what we're talking about, and I like the theme that you're talking about is more of like safe, comfortable, a good general area in a lot of scenarios, all weather portfolio, almost like we've heard talk about in the past. Now, some people on the flip side, as opposed to the 8% rule, will talk about a 3% withdrawal
Yeah.
rate, and that being a very, very conservative way to hold on to things to ensure there's no impacts on their portfolio. But what are the personal impacts, I guess, of someone being overly conservative with their withdrawal rate?
Well, if you take something as low as 3%, which has never been necessary in history that I can determine from the data I have, you're just going to accumulate a lot of money, and it's going to grow and grow and grow. And you have to ask yourself, do I really do I comfortable with building all this wealth and not using it while I'm alive? For some people, maybe it makes sense. Maybe they want to leave a substantial legacy to their heirs, and that's okay. But that's a choice. They have to have a balance in life between what their own needs are and what they want to leave to their kids. So,
That's the key word right there, balance. Absolutely. Now, you've done a lot of this research, obviously, for a lot of us, but then also personally. What withdrawal rate do you feel comfortable with in your current retirement situation?
I retired 12 years ago, and I started out with, at the time, 4.5%, which is the worst case scenario, because at that time I hadn't developed the sophistication that I have now in my research, where I recognized how I could factor inflation and stock market valuation and actually come up with a number, that accurately reflects history. And that's worked out real well for me. In fact, I've had to increase my withdrawals a little bit, or else, stock market since, 2013, it's been a pretty darn good place to be. Too good, probably. We're going to pay a price for that at some point. But yeah, that's worked out well. And I'm probably a poster boy for somebody who took out too little, to start out.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting part of the conversation. I think you as you said, you retired 12 years ago. You maybe started at what you deemed as generally conservative at that time. And
Yeah.
as you saw things move along, maybe you increase your withdrawal rate because you're saying, wow, I'm actually getting wealthier as time goes on, even though I'm not working. Would you suggest sort of a sliding scale for people as they age with regard to their withdrawal rate?
That happens naturally if you think about it. If you have a withdrawal plan, you're going to start out with maybe 5% the first year. And the last year, let's say the 30th year, okay, which is hopefully you're not going to live much longer than that if you plan for that. You're going to be taking out 100% because you want to go to zero. So between the first year at 5% and the last year at 100%, withdrawals rate is going to naturally increase, going to go 6, 7, 8, 10, 12. So yes, you find if you have a plan like that, your withdrawal rate will increase naturally.
I love that. Yeah. And then if we're talking averages, I guess that's where the 5% rule comes into play, because if you're starting at 4.5 or 4.25, and then you're making your way up to 12 by the time, your retirement years have aged, you're getting to be more than average. And as you said at the top of the conversation, that's in the 5% range at a minimum. And some even looking at that 7% withdrawal rate for an average. Is that right?
That's right. And historically, some lucky people were able to take as high as 16%, believe it or not. This was during the 1930s, right after the big stock market crash. And you had one quarter where the stock market actually doubled in one quarter. So, you're looking pretty good after that.
I think that's incredible. I think what this conversation can do for a lot of people, Bill, and I'll say personally for myself, is can help us exhale a little bit more with regard to our retirement goals and the things that we need to do with our working years, and help us to kind of claw back some more of that time to live our lives. Because when we're adding a whole nother percent, like you said, if you're multiplying it by 25 versus 20, that is a big change that people can have in their life. So I think that ability is a big deal. So I guess let me ask you to talk to a couple who's listening right now and saying, I've been planning around this 4% rule for a long time. And the fact that I can now plan around a 5% rule, if it fits well for my situation, how can I take that first step to allowing myself to take my foot off the gas a little bit with regard to my investments and go back to enjoying life? What would you say to that couple who's listening right now?
Well, I think we sit down and we do a hard calculation on what they think they need in terms of income when they retire, and then calculate backwards to see what their savings should be. And, if you're saving for retirement, you've got 15, 20, 25 years, you should be, in my opinion, 100% stocked. You should be accumulating as much capital as possible. You don't care at all about stock market volatility when you're saving over a long time frame like that. You just want to get those bucks piling up there, in the wheelbarrow. So that's very important for them to recognize. And then when they get within 5 years of retirement, then we kind of take an assessment of where are we, where's the stock market valuation, where is inflation, and maybe start throttling down a little bit.
I love that. Yeah. So this overemphasis on bonds might be quite detrimental to people as they are investing for long-term retirement plans. I guess with that, looking at simplified processes like a target date fund where you've got 20% bonds and
Uh-huh.
you're 35 years old, do you think that's a major detriment for people?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessary. If
Yeah.
you got, a person like that would have at least a 30-year time frame for retirement once they're, doing fire. So that I think they just simply put it all into a diversified portfolio of international American stocks, small, large cap, mid cap, get some gold in there and just sit back for 30 years and don't even look at it. Just enjoy, just keep adding in. Add in. The important thing is to get a decent percentage from your income placed in that kind of account
I
on a
think that's
regular basis.
fantastic. Yeah, Bill. Well, thank you so much for this conversation today. I really appreciate it. I understand you're working on a new book with this
Yep.
research involved in it. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Oh, yeah, I'll be happy to. I didn't know if you wanted me to mention. Yeah, it's basically think of it as a cookbook. It gives you all the instructions you need to create your own personal withdrawal plan. I identify what I call 8 elements you can use to customize your plan. It also talks about the other two, inflation, stock market valuation. Puts them all together, shows you how to customize it for your situation. And then also, I thought would be interesting for folks, if you have a 30 or 40-year plan, that's a long time. And I don't know how many plans start out with certain, parameters. And then you find out somewhere after 10 years, circumstances have changed. So I looked at 4 or 5 situations where the individual ran into a speed bump in the middle of retirement with their plan and had to decide, do I need to make a change here? And if so, what? So in other words, you need to manage your plan. You just can't start out, I'm going to take 5%, let it ride for the rest of your retirement. You have to be prepared to deal with, potential problems. So I cover that in detail. And I hope everybody enjoys it. I spent a year writing it and thousands of hours of calculation, and it's loaded with charts because I think about 150 charts and tables because I like to explain my ideas graphically to people. I find that's the easiest way to convey. And then I'll eventually have a website where the book just isn't big enough to take all the stuff I want to put in it. So the website will have additional charts and additional, new information, new discoveries. So
I love that. When could we expect the book?
my publisher Wiley tells me August 5th. You can order it now, on major booksellers' websites. And I just got a email from Wiley today saying BarnesandNoble.com is offering, I think, a 25% discount this week to the end of the week. So you can save yourself $6, put it in your retirement account. That's $6,
I love it. I love it. Well, I'll make sure to have some links, everybody, for the book in the description of our show, both on the podcast and our YouTube channel, because we got to get this information out there. I think it's going to be life-changing for a lot of people, Bill. I think what you've done for the investment community and helping people retire comfortably is an incredible life mission, and I am honored to have you on the show today. So thank you so much for your time today, Bill.
Really nice of you to say that. Thanks, Andy.